Hello everyone, this is CA Divesh Harpalani. Welcome back to this channel named Inside Angle and welcome to the first episode of this series named The Final Battle. Today we shall be starting with the 1.5 day strategy for the subject of audit, the subject which is most difficult to cover in the 1.5 days. So before starting, let me just state briefly that for the 1.5 day planner, I used to always consider a timeline of about approximately 20 hours between the gap between two exams. I mean, 20 hours that you would get to study. But for the subject of audit, I mean, obviously, like I said, it is the most difficult to cover within those 1.5 days. So in case of audit, it is supposed to be 25 and not 20 hours. So, and again, quickly just letting you know that I am a morning person. So I used to sleep early and get up early in the morning. So obviously those of you who are night people can suitably modify this 1.5 day planner. Also a disclaimer that this is not an ideal 1.5 day planner. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, every one of us has their own way of studying. You might probably take more time in COE. I might take more time in probably investigation chapter. So I mean, obviously the time taken will differ. The plan that I'm sharing is just to share the way you are supposed to plan. So I'm not saying this is the plan that you're supposed to follow. I'm just trying to share with you the way that you're supposed to plan. I mean, obviously you can make your own plan in a suitable manner. If you're a night person, you can make it accordingly and you can customize it accordingly. So yes, I'll be sharing the plan that I had followed back in that 1.5 days and what actually happened, whether I was able to complete the course or not, we'll figure out in the course of this video. So yes, starting with the day one. Well, the day one when you come back from the SFM exam, the exam of SFM you should get completed by 5. Assuming you take about half an hour to 1 hour to reach home, you should be home by max 6. Take a break of half an hour, start by 6:30. And so the day one, I mean, for someone like me, I used to probably not be able to take too much of load on the day one. So I used to keep easier chapters, the chapters which were probably easier to remember, easier to recall, which I would be able to study even if I were very tired that day. So that is what I used to plan for the day one. I used to plan just a 3 hour schedule on day one, not too much, as to try and sleep early on the first day. So yes, when it comes to audit, I had planned it to be CFS, company audit, and MCQ notes. So yes, CFS anywhere around 45 to 60 minutes. Let me state that this is not the exact time that you might take. It could be 45 minutes in your case. It could be 1 hour and 15 minutes in your case. But considering myself, I had kept this time, and this is not a conservative. I mean, this is not the least estimate. This is an actual estimate. I mean, 60 minutes is something that you will actually take. I mean, I could have said 45 minutes and then you go ahead and take 60 minutes. I could say 75 minutes on a higher side, but you really cannot afford to keep those higher sides when it comes to this 1.5 days. Otherwise, to complete this course will be very difficult. So whatever time I've given is reasonably enough to complete each chapter is what I believe. And rather at the same time, it is very much desirable to complete that particular chapter within this time frame, so as to complete the entire course within 1.5 days. So yes, audit of CFS, company audit, including Caro, and MCQ notes is what I had planned for day one. MCQ notes, what are MCQ notes? Just briefly stating, whatever MCQ booklet or whatever MCQs ICA had issued, whether it was RTPs, MTPs, whatever MCQ collection we had, you cannot really afford to revise all the MCQs the day before exam. So I had prepared handwritten notes for the MCQs. I mean, just the summary kind of notes. Probably there are a lot many MCQs. If you remember, around an auditor, auditing how many insurance companies. So it's just possible to audit 3 insurance companies, and maximum 2 being life insurance, 2 being two general insurance companies. So I just written this one line in my notebook, and this would cover most of the MCQs that revolved around the topic. So this way I had my handwritten notes of MCQs anywhere between 10 to 15 pages. So that should take anywhere around 30 minutes. I do remember, I think even Sanidhya Saraf sir on his channel did share for our attempt the MCQ notes that he had made. So you can refer that as well. So whether or not it is exhaustive is something you can probably figure out on your own. But then I had made my own MCQ notes handwritten, running across 10-15 pages, for which I had kept this 30 minutes. So 3 hours this way. And so 3 hours, and I've kept a buffer time of 15 minutes over here, 6:30 to 9:30, buffer time of 15 minutes, obviously for dinner, and another 15 minutes before you go to bed. 10 p.m. is what I expected to sleep. Next is obviously during exam days, I do suggest an average sleep of 6 hours is desirable. To be honest, there are people for whom the sleep of 3 hours might also suffice, and you may go ahead with 3 hours if that is fine with you. That doesn't really affect your health. There's few people who might require a sleep of 7 hours. If you are such a person, go for a sleep of 7 hours. But I think 6 hours on average should be enough. I've still kept 6.5 hours on day one, because on the day two there'll certainly be a compromise on the sleep. Starting with LODR on day two, first half, the reason I've kept LODR first is it is important. And so those chapters which are very important and probably you need to you cannot really compromise on them is something that I used to keep in the first slot of the second day. That is exactly what I have done over here. So chapter 4, automated environment, there is one short question that you can expect LODR as well. So that is the reason I've kept these two over here. Followed by, now again, one more important point that I want to convey over here, not just for audit but for other subjects as well. But the way I used to plan is, if you see, I used to actually try and apply time and motion study in my 1.5 day planner. So if you see, all of these chapters are a part of the module 3 of audit SM. So I've kept all these three together so that I don't end up wasting a lot of time switching between books. So in fact, not to say I studied all these chapters just from the SM, it was SM and some other notes as well. So what I did was, let's just say for example, ये चारों chapter की पहले notes कर ली, and then ये चारों chapter की फिर SM में से whatever answers I've done from the SM, I do it from the SM. So I did it all 4 chapters together. I mean, I could probably take internal audit and then I could take insurance, but then that'll just end up wasting a lot of time switching between books, and it is all about the mindset. So better is I kept all these things together, so that I can save on the motion time as well. Within these chapters, if you ask me, I think PSU and liabilities of auditors, each of the total of them you can complete in 1 hour, and internal audit and investigation you can complete in probably 1 hour each. I mean, the breakup between the two is something that you can decide for yourself, but I think total 3 hours is something that you need to keep in your mind. And so you might, certainly it might be the case that you exceed taking, I mean, you go beyond 180 minutes, you end up taking 4 hours as well, but then that is not desirable, because फिर end में कुछ ना कुछ छूट जाएगा. So please make sure that you try to adhere to these timelines. When it comes to tax audit, I had more so relied on question bank and SM illustrations more than the content. So that's the reason I've kept 1.5 hours over here, and it does take 1.5 hours, given the quantum of the tax audit questions. Again, depending on your own strategy, your source, number of questions you do, you can modify this time as per your schedule or your comfort with the chapter. Chapter 3 SM, I think 40 minutes, considering the importance of the chapter and the probably the toughness of the chapter. So chapter 3 is not as tough, so probably 40 minutes should be probably enough to cover this chapter. So I've written over here old RTPs and extra questions. What does this mean? Those questions in RTPs which were not covered elsewhere, either in the question bank or as a part of the test your knowledge. So all those questions in the previous RTPs, when I say old RTPs, it means the new course RTPs till date. The questions which are not covered elsewhere, I covered them separately. So I think probably there were 5-6 such questions. I covered them, and I had kept a slot to cover these questions. And yes, I've kept a buffer as well over here, 30 minutes. If you see, I have between 5 a.m. and 1 p.m. I've not really kept any break in between, and I'm sure anyone will want a break when it is so long hours. I mean, 8 long hours. So this 30 minutes, I'm not saying you take it towards the end. You can take it anywhere in between. You can take 3 breaks of 10 minutes or 2 breaks of 15 minutes. That is totally upon you. In fact, if you see over here, I have kept half an hour between 4:30 and 5 as well for you to freshen up. Then I have kept a good 1 hour break for you to have your lunch and rest, because rest is also very important. Then what I've done is between 2 to 9 p.m. I've kept. So there's a specific reason I have kept these chapters in the first slot and these chapters in the second slot. And I'll tell you the logic behind it, something that you might consider while making your 1.5 plan for audit as well as for other subjects. So yes, if you see bank, insurance and NBFC, whatever answers, if you see, I mean, obviously bank is a very important chapter, but if you see the answers of bank or insurance or NBFC, they are not as tough. So they are more so logical, and you don't really need to ratify the answers. They are very logical, and if you understand, you can really write in your own words. So that is the reason I felt even if in the second half I'm a little more tired, or not as fresh as I were in the first half, I'll be able to probably cover these chapters easily. So that's the reason I've kept bank, insurance, NBFC in the second half. Again, the same logic, not to waste time switching between the books. First going through notes of these 3 chapters, and then these 3 chapters again, doing the SM, test your knowledge and stuff of that. I mean, whatever I had to cover from the SM. So in sequence, trying not to probably, I mean, again, bank is important, so I would cover that first. NBFC I would cover towards the last, considering it is comparatively less important when it comes to bank versus NBFC. And but I'll just make sure that I'll cover these 3 chapters together. Now, essays is something I've covered towards the end of the second day. The reason is, I mean, on a personal note, I always felt essays are not as scoring as special audit, because of late institute has been asking from pronouncements, and I think there's a human limitation, that at the end of the day, jitna karo kam hi, and there's a lot of stuff in essays. It is very difficult to cover each and everything. Now, obviously, that doesn't give us a reason not to study essays. We certainly need to, but then because of this reason, special audit, as in these other chapters, become probably easier to score, because probably what are the questions that are supposed to be asked. Whereas in case of essays, there's a plethora of things that could be asked, and it is probably at times very difficult to even understand the question as to which essay is being put forward in the question. So considering that, I chose to give less importance to essays, kept it towards the second half, last of the second half of the second day, so that even if I have to compromise on time, I can do it so far as the essays was concerned. The main ones, so I had decided a few important essays that I felt were important for me. I mean, according to my analysis. So for example, 570 I felt was very important, 701, 705 I felt were very important. So I tried and targeted them towards the very initial. And so I kept 2 hours and 15 minutes for probably, I'm not very sure of the exact number, but probably 15 such main important essays. Another 45 minutes for a few questions which I did not cover from the notes, but separately covered for the question. And I'm sure many of you have been referring different sources for essays. Just one thing, to make sure there is no duplication when it comes to the sources. What you study from one source, one essay that you study from one source shouldn't be the essay that you study from the other source. And the remaining essays, whatever, another 15 odd essays were there. I kept just 60 minutes, because those were the relatively less important ones, the relatively easier essays, if I could frame it this way. So essays is something that I had thought, if required, if need be, I will have to compromise on this. So if you see, actually, I mean, I've kept probably around 4 hours for essay, which most of you might actually say is less, and I'm sure it is less, because ideally you will need around probably 6 to 8 hours to do essays. But if you see over here, I've written chapter 1 plus 2 plus 6 essay. So in fact, if you see, chapter 1 plus 2 plus 6 is also an extension of essays. So I mean, all those questions that are covered in the testing knowledge of chapter 1 or 2 or 6, I covered those questions directly from SM and not from any other notes or any other question bank. So I have kept 2 hours for essays over here as well. इसका रीजन ये है, I mean, keeping that on first in the first half of day 3 is because day 3, as in the day of exam, is because I personally felt that the test knowledge questions of essays are relatively more important than any other question from any other question bank. So I wanted to do those questions on the day of exam itself, which is why I've kept it over here. So total, if you see, I've kept 6 hours for essays. Is also, I mean, when it comes to audit or when it comes to any plan has to be flexible, and it is practically inhuman. I mean, it is very difficult, or rather not possible, if I say that you stick to your plan 100% end to end. So which is why I've kept here a buffer of 1.5 hours to cover whatever backlog you would have had in the entire day. And I'm sure there would be some backlog. So I think this is good enough to cover the backlog, sleeping at 11 p.m. and waking up by 4. So if you see, there's a 5-hour sleep that I've kept over here. The previous night it was 6.5 hours, averaging to around 5.5, 42 6 hours, which when it comes to audit subject, I think it should be fine. And in which ways I've kept the rest over here as well. So I think anywhere around 5 hours and 45 minutes on an average. Quality review and peer review, there were a lot many amendments in our attempt. Plus, I mean, because of this specific reason, plus there's a lot many things that you'll have to actually, learn when it comes to quality review and peer review. So which is why I kept it on the day of exam. So basically, my logic of, what I usually do when it comes to a normal plan is on the day 1, that is after coming back from the previous exam, I would keep a relatively easier chapter to cover जो भूलने के chances कम हो. So in this case, it was CFS. The next day morning, that is day 2 morning, I will keep such chapters which are very important so that I can do them with a fresh mind. On day 3 morning also, I'll keep a few chapters which are very important, say COE over here. But not only important, they are also the ones you can do quickly. So COE is something I had confidence on. So I was able to do COE quickly. So it was important. So उस दिन सुबह किया हुआ, and today morning I do COE, and in the afternoon it's exam. So it becomes relatively very easier. But then when you keep anything for day 3, there's always a risk that वो चीज छूट जाएगी. So you have to keep only such chapters which you are confident that you'll be covering anyhow. So that's what I had done. Quality review 1.5 hours. COE, in COE, what planned I had thought was first learning by heart all the clauses with the clause numbers, schedule number, right? And post that I went through the questions, because when it comes to COE, the question bank specifically when it comes to COE is very important. So once I went through all the clauses, I went through the question bank, and post that I went through any residual notes that were there. Probably any institute guidelines or anything of that sort that was not already covered in the clauses of the question bank. I covered that separately. So 2.5 hours over here for COE, it could be 3 hours as well. I mean, obviously, you might change the breakup over here. And when I say revision when it comes to subject like audit, it at times becomes important. So revision, not really saying you'll be able to revise each and everything that you've studied in the last 1.5 years. Obviously not the case. But then a few things probably you feel that, ये answer बहुत important है, एक answer bank का है, you feel कि there's a lot of chance that if this asks in exam tomorrow, and you don't really want to miss out on those marks, so that could be 10-15 such questions. Obviously that is something that you decide for yourself. A few questions of your attempts, RTP and MTP, that you might want to revise in the last hour. When it comes to self notes, I mean, while studying in the last 1.5 days, or while studying in the third reading, the last reading before exam, you might want to, make sure, like I said, 10-15 answers here. And a few limits as well. So for example, in our MCQs, a lot many limits were tested. So rotation of audit or ho gaya, audit committee ka ho gaya. So you might want to revise those limits as well. So that is something for which I have kept 1.5 hours over here. And if you see 4 a.m. plus 7.5 hours come to 11:30 a.m. Assuming you need to leave an hour before the exam starts. So you need to leave at 12:45. You still have an hour and 15 minutes, which you can take breaks between these. You can have a breakfast, you can get fresh. So I think an hour and 15 minutes also for the backlog, or rather for contingency, 1 hour and 15 minutes is fine. So I have also kept that contingency of 1 hour and 15 minutes between this time. Please do take note of that. There's also a contingency of 30 minutes over here. There is a contingency of 1.5 hours over here. And there's a contingency of 15 minutes over here as well. So that's what I had planned. Now, whether or not I was able to follow it, obviously not. I was not able to follow this exact same thing, because many times you end up taking much more time than you would actually thought for a particular chapter. Maybe because you're not in the right frame of mind, you're not as fresh. Coupled with the fact that on day 1, I was not able to actually study for 3 hours. Maybe it was 1.5 hours to 2 hours. So that 1 hour again got carried forward, and that happened. So yes, this is where I had to compromise. Essays was something that I had to compromise on, coupled with my sleeps. Yes, when it came to audit, not that this is not something that I would really suggest you to do, but this actually happened with me. That because of me not being able to cope up with the audit course, I'm sure it happens with all CFM students. I slept for just 2 hours that night. I mean, the night before the exam. Yes, that is a big risk to take. I mean, you might actually feel very drowsy during the exam hours, but then I just said one thing to myself, कि audit का subject वापस नहीं पढ़ना. I don't really want to reappear in the next attempt, and this is the last audit exam of my life. So that's what I said to myself. And the next statement I said to myself was that I want this to be the last exam, last audit exam of my life. So as to make sure that this is the last audit exam and that I don't have to reappear for this exam again, I probably need to compromise on sleep, and that is exactly what I did to probably cover my inefficiency during these 1.5 days of probably wherever I lost time. So that's what happened in my case. So you be mentally prepared for anything that could happen. But all I can say for now is don't really think of sleeping just 2 hours as of this stage. Do try and target at least 6 hours of an average sleep. Target to yahi hona chahiye. I mean, things could obviously change in that 1.5 days. And obviously, it's like it said, planning should be flexible. But you should certainly have a plan, because if you don't have a plan, you can see it's already within the plan as well. It is so difficult to cover audit. So if it is not for the plan, it will certainly struggle in those 1.5 days, which is not really suggestible. So please do make sure you prepare a plan for yourself. Do try and adhere to it to the extent possible. Do keep contingencies like I did, and do have a logic in arranging the chapters that you are arranging. So you also could keep something like, I mean, here it was I compromised on essays. It could be something else that you might be thinking of compromising on. So do be mentally prepared. If things don't go the way you planned, what is it that you will be compromising on? I think that's exactly what I could be suggesting as of this stage. Stay tuned for the other subjects as well. I hope this was helpful. I'll make sure the other subjects are not as lengthy. I mean, the other videos are not as long as this one. This one was long because it's the first video, coupled with the fact that this was audit. So yes, thank you so much. All the very best, people. I hope this helped. Bye-bye.